The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
So talking about students at MIT, so some of you are graduating soon, and this might be your last chance to ask Noam Chomsky a question. So anyone who hasn't spoken yet would like to ask a question before you graduate?
So we've talked in this class a bit about silencing and how that kind of feeds into the whole system. Sorry, I can speak up. So we've talked about silencing and
Silencing.
Yeah, and how stories are hidden, like you talked about. What can we do about that? Like what measurable steps can we take towards like uncovering these stories and actually making change happen?
Well, what you can do about silencing is speak up. I mean, we have a lot of freedom if we use it. In fact, a lot more than in the past. So, take the last thing I mentioned, for women, the opportunities to speak up and become active and have an impact is way beyond what it was, say, 50 years ago. In fact, it's, I was talking to Michel about this before. When I got a ton of email, and a lot of it is from young people. And one question that keeps coming up over and over again is, everything's awful, what can we do? But if you look closely, over many years, I've noticed that the kinds of questions you get depend on where the people are coming from. So if people are coming from, say, when I go down to give talks in immigrant slums in South Boston, nobody ever asks what they can do. They tell me what they're doing. When I go to a remote village in southern Colombia where people are being murdered by paramilitaries, and there's a chemical company a gold mining company trying to destroy their water supply, they don't ask me what should they do. They tell me what they're doing. When people are privileged and have every opportunity in front of them, they ask, what can we do? And the fact is, almost anything. There's all sorts of opportunities open, way more than there were in the past, because we do enjoy the legacy of people who have struggled in the past under much harsher conditions and have provided us with the opportunities we now have. Like, say, the opportunities to be a student at MIT. That's an opportunity, gives you all sorts of things. It was closed to half the population 50 years ago. It was closed, of course, to minorities almost entirely. And, well, that's it just illustrates what's going on all over the society. So take, say, the Sanders campaign, which I think was the most important aspect of the 2016 election, by far. Out of that, there are groups developing that are really trying to do things. You can be part of them, make new ones. There's any kind of, all sorts of opportunities. And I think the prospects for the future are not too bad when you think of people's actual attitudes, and the way those attitudes could be melded into activist and political and other programs to bring about changes in society. So I don't think there's a real shortage of opportunity. There's a kind of there are all sorts of efforts to atomize people, keep you alone. That's one of the functions of social media, incidentally. You sit alone with your whatever it is, your device, and you think you have friends in Indonesia and so on, but you're really separated from the people around you. That has atomization is a very important way of controlling people, because you can only do things if you work together. So when you're all separated, that's great. Then those who really run things, they do get together. They don't sit around looking at the iPads and so on. So you can keep the population. In fact, that's one of the main things consumerism is about. You can take a look at the history of the advertising industry. It's quite interesting. The huge advertising public relations industry developed in the freest countries in the world, in Britain and the United States, about a century ago. And the reason was pretty clear, was often stated. People had won enough freedom so that you couldn't control them by force. So you had to control them in other ways. And the best way of controlling them is what was called convincing them to be concerned with the superficial things of life, like consumption. So if you can get to a stage where, thinking of my granddaughter, where teenage girls on a Saturday afternoon, the best thing they can think of doing is walking through a mall and looking at things they can't buy, you know. That's great. When you've get to a society like that, you've got people under control. And there's some pretty obvious things that are never discussed. Like you've all heard 10 million times about the wonders of free market societies. But almost no one tells you that the business world hates free market societies. And in fact, they spend hundreds of $billions a year to undermine markets. It's called advertising. Anyone who's studied economics knows that markets, you know, the marvels of markets are based on informed consumers making rational choices. And that's what then you study the mathematics and you make up the models and so on. Take a look at the real world. Hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year to ensure that uninformed people make irrational choices. That's called advertising. If you had a market society, if, say, Ford Motor Company has cars to sell, what they would do is say, here are the characteristics of our cars. You know, small ad on television says, here's the characteristics, here's what Consumer Report says about it. You know, that's not what they do. What they do is try to create illusions so you'll be uninformed and make an irrational choice. In fact, while the economics department is talking about rational choice models and so on with informed consumers, the business world is trying to make sure it doesn't happen. And of course, that's the thing that has the effects. And speaking of silencing, how much do you hear about this in economics courses or in the general discussion? I mean, it's not deep, it's not profound, it's not quantum physics. We all know it, it's right in front of our eyes, but it's kept silent. Those are the kind of things you have to break through with.
Thank you so much, Noam. That was wonderful. And